She fell in the mud and everyone laughed, except him. A feared warrior who never smiled knelt before her, and the next day made a request that silenced the entire village. What happened next, no one was prepared to see. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This twist will be unforgettable. The ground at the Sunday market in São João do Agreste was muddy after the previous night's heavy rain. Colorful stalls contrasted with the still cloudy sky, while villagers moved between tents selling cheese, sweets and crafts. The mud mixed with animal manure formed a slippery carpet where women balanced straw baskets on their heads and children ran carefree. Amid the bustle, a figure all too familiar to everyone, yet hardly noticed, stumbled. Victoria, her left leg, had dragged since birth. An inexperienced midwife, the gossip said. Others claimed it was punishment for family sins. She lived off the embroidery she made on dish towels and tablecloths, which she traded for food when she could sell them. When she fell in the mud, scattering her embroidery across the dirty ground, the village couldn't contain their laughter. As they always did, not with explicit cruelty, but with that disguised indifference of humor that cuts deeper than any knife. "There goes the cripple again," whispered Donna Alzira to her friend. "She can't even walk properly." No one extended a hand. Children stopped to look, some pointing, others imitating Victoria's way of walking. Adults pretended not to see, but their restrained laughter revealed the silent cruelty. That's when he appeared. Kawa, a man with indigenous features descended from the Pataxo who had inhabited the lands beyond the river for generations. Broad shoulders, face marked by time, and sun serene and steady gaze. He rarely came to the village, always in silence to sell honey and medicinal herbs he gathered in the forest. Everyone knew he never smiled, nor did he involve himself with anyone from the community. Rumors about him were many, that he practiced witchcraft, that he talked to animals, that he had killed a man in the big city. No one knew the truth, but they feared and respected his distance. That day, however, Kawa stopped before the fallen woman. He didn't immediately extend his hand. He knelt first. With a clean handkerchief he took from his pocket, he gently cleaned the mud from Victoria's trembling hands, then collected each of the scattered embroideries, not caring about the dirt. That stained his fingers. The entire market stopped to watch this unexpected scene. Silence took over the square, broken only by the distant murmur of children who had already lost interest. "Thank you," murmured Victoria, eyes downcast, accustomed to not looking people in the face. Kawa didn't respond with words. He merely nodded, carefully helped her to her feet and, to everyone's surprise, carried her basket of embroidery while accompanying her to the small mud house at the end of Flores Street. He left her at the door, handed her the basket and returned the same way without looking back, ignoring the curious glances that followed him. The next day, the unexpected. Kawa returned. It wasn't market day. There was no apparent reason for his presence in the village. He brought something no one expected, an embroidery framed in jacaranda wood depicting a hummingbird over a red flower. The hummingbird, a symbol of resistance and freedom for his people, because even being small it could fly in all directions, even backward, defying what seemed impossible. He stopped in front of Victoria's house, knocked 3 times. When she opened, surprised by the visit, he extended the gift and said in a firm voice in front of neighbors who were already gathering to peek, "I come to ask for your companionship for life. Will you be my wife before God and men?" Shock ran through the street like lightning. Windows of houses opened, faces appeared in doorways. Silence preceded the laughter and malicious comments. "Marry the cripple?" said Seu Antonio, the store owner, aloud. "He must want her land," whispered Donna Zulmira. "Or he's fulfilling some promise," added another. But Kawa didn't respond to the provocations. He remained standing, his gaze fixed on Victoria, awaiting her answer. She, trembling, didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her that way, as if seeing beyond her crooked leg, beyond what everyone saw, as if seeing her soul. "I need time," was all she managed to say. He nodded respectfully. "I will return in 3 days to hear your answer," he said simply, before turning and walking back beyond the river, leaving behind a village in uproar and a woman with her heart beating as it never had before. That night, Vittoria couldn't sleep. She looked at the hummingbird embroidery and thought about what it meant. Why would a man like Kawa, respected even in his silence, choose someone like her? Was it pity? Was it some kind of revenge against the village that always treated him with suspicion? Or was it something deeper, something she barely allowed herself to dream of? The questions danced in her mind as the enveloping darkness illuminated the small room. Outside, the village was already buzzing with comments about the strange marriage proposal, not imagining that this would be just the beginning of a story that would forever change San Juan do Agreste. The following 3 days were the longest in Vittoria's life. News of the marriage proposal spread quickly, reaching even neighboring settlements. People deliberately passed in front of her house. Some even knocked on her door with flimsy excuses, just to get a close look at the woman who had received such an unusual proposal. Children now shouted, "Bride of the Indian," when they saw her. The laughter continued, but now mixed with an almost fierce curiosity. On the 3rd day, as the afternoon began to fall, firm knocks on the door announced Kawa's arrival. He wore simple but clean clothes. In his hands, he carried a small package made of banana leaves tied with natural fibers. The crowd that formed at a distance made no pretense of hiding their interest in the scene. "I've come to hear your answer," he said without beating around the bush. Vittoria took a deep breath. During those days, she had thought of every possibility, every reason that could lead this man to want to marry her, but deep down, a small flame of hope had lit in her heart. Perhaps, just perhaps, he truly saw her as no one ever had. "Why me?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Of all women, why choose precisely the one everyone despises?" Kawa looked deeply into her eyes. "Because you are like the ipi tree that grows on rock. No one believes it will bloom, but when the time comes, its beauty surpasses everything around." A silent tear ran down Vittoria's face. At that moment, she knew her answer. "I accept," she said simply. He then unwrapped the small package, revealing a necklace of red pau Brazil seeds interspersed with small white shells. "This is my family's mirakita. It symbolizes the union of two hearts that recognize each other beyond the eyes." He placed the necklace on her neck with delicate gestures. The crowd watched in silence, some with disbelief, others with disdain, few with genuine curiosity. Kawa then did something that surprised everyone. He knelt before Vittoria and kissed her right hand, a gesture of respect and devotion so pure that even the most skeptical felt a tightness in their chest. "In one full moon, I will return for you. Prepare to live beyond the river, where my cabin awaits you." After that, he left as he always did, in silence, with firm steps, without looking back. The days that followed were transformative for Vittoria. She began to arrange her few belongings, to sew a simple dress for her wedding, to dream of a different life. But for the community, it was a time for fermenting gossip and increasingly absurd theories. It was during this period that Donna Joanna, the owner of the house where Vittoria lived as a tenant, came with news that fell like lightning on the seamstress. "Vittoria, I need the house in 20 days. My daughter is getting married and I need the place for her." It was a lie, everyone knew. Donna Joanna's daughter lived in the capital and had no plans to return. It was just the way the owner found to rid herself of the shame of having as a tenant the woman who would marry the strange Indian. "But Donna Joanna, I've always paid on time, and I only have 20 days until my wedding. After that, I won't be here anymore." "I'm sorry," replied the woman, not really feeling sorry. "I want the house vacated in 20 days, not a day more." The news spread quickly, and soon came the consequences. The few people who still bought her embroidery stopped ordering. The baker no longer accepted trading bread for her work. In a few days, Vittoria found herself without income and with the threat of being homeless before her wedding. That's when an unexpected figure appeared at her door. Donna Celestina, the village healer. An elderly woman, respected by all, even by those who mocked her herbs and prayers. She carried a small cloth bag and a serene look. "May I come in, my child?" Vittoria, surprised, let her pass. Donna Celestina rarely left her house on the hilltop. When she did, It was to attend to sick people who couldn't come to her, never for social visits. "I brought a tea to calm your heart," said the old woman, sitting in the only available chair, "and also my ears, which still work well despite my age." That afternoon, for the first time in years, Vittoria talked about her life, her fears, her hopes. She talked about how she felt invisible until Cauin appeared, about how she now faced not just the usual disdain but active hostility. Donna Celestina listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her wise eyes fixed on the young woman's face. When Vittoria finished, the healer took her hands between her own, wrinkled by time. "What I see is a circle closing, my child. Many years ago, I knew a young Pataxo woman who fell in love with a man from this village. She was rejected, humiliated, expelled. That young woman was Cauin's mother." Vittoria felt her heart race. "Does he know that?" "He knows. And he also knows that it was in this village that his mother suffered from sadness and abandonment after the man who said he loved her gave in to pressure from others." "So, it's revenge?" Donna Celestina smiled softly. "No, my child, it's healing." Cauin grew up hearing this story, not with hatred, but with the certainty that one day the circle would need to close, not with more pain, but with true love. Before leaving, the healer left a small package on the table. "These are sunflower seeds. Plant them around your house. When they bloom, your luck will change." Vittoria planted the seeds that same night, under the dark sky. She didn't know if she believed in superstitions, but at that moment, she needed to cling to any hope. The days passed, the eviction date approached, as did the wedding. It was a race against time, and she didn't know which would come first, salvation or complete ruin. The next morning, when she opened the door, she found a basket of fresh bread. There was no note, no sign of who had left it. The next day, vegetables and a small bag of beans appeared. On the third day, a piece of fabric for her wedding dress. The village watched in silence as anonymous gifts began to appear at Vittoria's door every morning. No one claimed authorship, but everyone knew Donna Celestina had planted more than sunflower seeds. She had planted the seed of doubt in the hardened hearts of San Juan do Agreste. There were only 10 days left until the wedding when Donna Joanna's ultimatum took on more threatening contours. Not satisfied with the eviction order, the owner spread word that she would hire men from the neighboring town to remove Vittoria's belongings if she didn't leave by the deadline. "I'll throw everything in the street, as one does with trash," she declared loudly in Seu Antonio's store. The news reached Vittoria's ears through Donna Maria do Carmo, one of the few people who still spoke to her. "My child, I'm worried. Joanna is determined to humiliate you before the wedding. She says it's to teach a lesson to those who mix with Indians." Vittoria felt her stomach sink. As much as she tried to be strong, the idea of having her few belongings thrown in the mud, exposed for all to see, was devastating. Especially the embroideries that would be her dowry, worked on with such care over the years. "I have nowhere to go before the wedding, Donna Maria, and I don't know how to warn Cauin." "I have an idea," said the neighbor. "My nephew Joaquim is going fishing in the river tomorrow. I can ask him to look for Cauin and take a message." The next day, Joaquim left with a simple message written by Vittoria. "I need you before the full moon. There are problems." The young man promised to do his best, but no one knew exactly where Cauin's cabin was, only that it was beyond the river, somewhere among the ancient trees of the forest. 3 days passed without an answer. The sunflowers that Vittoria had planted were beginning to sprout, small green dots contrasting with the dark earth. She looked at them every morning, like someone looking for a sign, a hope. On the 4th day, when she was already losing hope, excitement took over the village. Cauin had arrived, but not alone. With him came 6 more men, all with the same indigenous features, carrying tools, wood, and other materials. Without asking anyone's permission, they went directly to the small plot of land next to the church, which belonged to the community but had been abandoned for years. In silence, they began to work. Children were the first to approach, curious. Then some men from the village, suspicious. Finally, even the women came to see what was happening. In a few hours, the structure of a small house began to take shape. Father Roberto, who had just returned from a visit to a distant community, was called urgently. He approached the group, observed the work for a few minutes, and then addressed Kawa. "What are you building on church land, my son?" Kawa stopped his work, faced the priest with respect. "A house for my future wife. She needs a place to stay until our wedding." "And who gave permission to use this land?" "The same God who gave my ancestors all this land before you arrived," responded Kawa without hostility, but with firmness. The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Donna Celestina, supported by her carved wooden cane. The crowd naturally made way for the healer. "Father Roberto," she said, "50 years ago when I arrived in this village, you weren't even born. Adieu. That time this land was donated to the church by my late husband, with one condition, that it be used to help those in need. Since then, no one has needed it more than Vittoria at this moment." The priest, a just man despite being conservative, reflected for a few moments. "You are right, Donna Celestina. The church cannot deny shelter to those in need." Turning to Kawa, he continued, "You can build the house, but I want you to know that this is a temporary loan. After the wedding, the land returns to the church." "After the wedding," replied Kawa, "my wife will live with me beyond the river. This house will be returned to whoever needs it most." News of the construction and the priest's decision spread like wildfire. Donna Joanna was furious, but she couldn't openly confront the church's authority. Other residents began to divide opinions. Some supported the decision, remembering that Vittoria had always been hard-working and honest, despite her condition. Others maintained their prejudice, but now in a more veiled form. What no one expected was what happened next. On the morning of the second day of construction, Seu Juvenal, the village carpenter, appeared with his tools. "I came to help," he said simply. Soon after, Zay from the butcher shop arrived with meat to feed the workers. Even some women appeared with fresh water and coffee. In 5 days, the small house was ready. It was simple but solid. It had 2 rooms, windows with chintz curtains donated by the church sisters, and a small wood stove built by Seu Benito, the mason. On the 6th day, the men who came with Kawan left, as silently as they had arrived. Vittoria, who had watched everything from a distance, was finally called by Kawan to see her new home. When she entered, she couldn't hold back her tears. On the improvised table made of crates, there was a bouquet of wildflowers. On the wall, a small but new mirror, a gift from Donna Maria do Carmo, and in a corner a manual loom specially made by Kawan, so she could continue her work as an embroiderer. "This is your home until we marry," he said. "After that it will belong to someone else who needs it." That night, after Kawan returned beyond the river, promising to return on the day set for the wedding, Vittoria sat on the small porch of her new house. The sunflowers she had planted at her previous house had been transplanted by Donna Celestina and already showed buds that would soon open. The night was clear and starry. That's when she noticed movement in the dark. She was startled for a moment, until she recognized the figure of Donna Joanna, her former landlady, approaching hesitantly. The woman stopped a few meters away, clearly uncomfortable. "I came to bring this," she said, extending a package. "They were my mother's. I thought they might serve for your wedding." When Vittoria opened the package, she found a pair of old earrings, simple but beautiful. She was speechless at the unexpected gesture. "No need to thank me," continued Donna Joanna, already moving away. "And you can stay in my house until the end of the month if you want. I won't demand that you leave early anymore." Before Vittoria could respond, the woman had already disappeared into the darkness. Something was changing in São João do Agreste, slowly but surely, like the sunflowers that were beginning to open their buds, announcing a new time. In the week preceding the wedding, a new tension arose. A group of men from the neighboring town, known for their intolerance and violence against indigenous people, had heard about the union between Kawa and Vittoria. "They say they will prevent the wedding," reported Father Roberto, concerned, during a visit to Vittoria's small house. "They say they won't allow more land to pass into the hands of Indians through marriages with white people." "But I don't have any land," protested Vittoria. "And even if I did, Kawa wouldn't marry me for that. I know, my daughter, but hatred and prejudice don't need real reasons to exist. They create their own justifications." The news brought a new fear to Vittoria, not for herself but for Kawa. What if those men hurt him? What if everything ended in violence? It was Donna Celestina who once again appeared with a solution. "The wedding cannot be postponed," she said firmly, "but it can be brought forward and held in secret." Father Roberto agreed. Instead of waiting for the full moon as planned, the wedding would be held at dawn the next day, with only a few trusted witnesses. Joaquim, Donna Maria's nephew, was sent immediately to notify Kawa. Vittoria spent the night awake, divided between anxiety over the sudden wedding and fear that something would go wrong. The first light of dawn had not yet appeared when Donna Celestina came to get her. "It's time," said the healer. "Come, the priest and Kawa are already waiting." The path to the church was made in absolute silence through alleys and side streets avoiding the main road. When they arrived, only 5 people were waiting: Father Roberto, So Juvenal, Donna Maria, Joaquim, and most importantly, Kawa. He was there, firm and serene as always, but there was a different gleam in his eyes upon seeing Vittoria enter the small church lit only by candles. The wedding was quick and simple, but no less moving. The vows were exchanged in whispers. The rings, simple silver bands that Kawa had obtained, were placed with hands, trembling with emotion. When the priest declared them husband and wife, and Kawa leaned down to gently kiss Vittoria's lips, it seemed the whole world had stopped to witness that moment of pure and simple truth. "Now you must leave immediately," said Father Roberto. "The men from town arrived today. You must be beyond the river before they discover what happened." Kawa nodded. He had already prepared everything. 2 horses awaited them behind the church, carrying only the essentials. The rest would be retrieved later when the dust settled. Vittoria had only time to embrace Donna Celestina and thank her in silent tears for everything the healer had done. "Take this," said the old woman, placing in her hands a small bag of herbs. "Hung over your door, it will ward off evil spirits and venomous tongues." The couple departed under the sky that was beginning to lighten, riding toward the river, to the territory where Kawa had grown up, to the new life that awaited them. They left behind a village divided between old prejudice and a new understanding that was beginning to be born, slowly, like the sunflower seeds that now sprouted throughout the yard of the small house next to the church. When the group of men from the neighboring town arrived in São João do Agreste, they found a silent village and a closed church. They knocked on the door of Vittoria's house, now empty. They went to Donna Joana, who pretended to know nothing. They looked for Father Roberto, who simply said, "What you seek is no longer here. They have returned home." Furious, but with no target for their anger, they ended up leaving after a few hours of fruitless searches. What they didn't expect was to find at the village exit a row of residents in silence, each holding a newly bloomed sunflower. There were almost 20 people of various ages, from children to the elderly. Donna Celestina was at the front, her fragile but imposing figure holding not 1 but 3 sunflowers, symbolizing the union of worlds, hers, Vittoria's, and Kawa's. There were no words, there was no confrontation. Only that image of peaceful resistance, organized by the healer and heeded even by those who once mocked Vittoria. The men left confused, disconcerted by the absence of fear where they expected to find submission. The oldest among them, a farmer, known for his cruelty, still hesitated as if wanting to say something, but faced with those firm gazes and the flowers pointing to the sky, he just lowered his head and went on his way. That night, the village celebrated in silence, not with party or music, but with the certainty that something important had changed inside each one. Beyond the river in APACHE territory, Vittoria and Kawa began their new life. His cabin was on a small elevation, overlooking the waters that snaked between ancient trees. It was simple but welcoming, built with wood and straw, integrated with nature in a way that village houses could never be. The floor was beaten earth, covered with mats woven from natural fibers. In the center, a circle of stones marked the place where fire was lit every night, not just to warm or cook, but to gather and tell stories. What most impressed Vittoria was the loom that Kawa had prepared for her, larger and more sophisticated than any she had seen, installed near a window that offered a view of the river. "So you can continue creating beauty with your hands," he explained, showing how he had carved each piece with care. "And so you never again need to exchange your work for less than its worth." In the first months, Vittoria learned the customs of Kawa's people. She learned to respect the land not as property, but as a mother who provides sustenance. She learned to recognize medicinal herbs, which were not harvested without first asking the plant's permission. She learned to understand the cycles of nature, which dictated time not in hours, but in sunrises and sunsets, in moons and seasons. In exchange, she taught Kawa embroidery techniques she had learned from her mother, showing how each stitch had its own rhythm and personality, just like each person. Weeks turned into months and months into seasons. With each occasional visit to the village, to sell herbs or exchange for supplies they didn't produce, they noticed small changes. The first was when Seu Antonio, the store owner, offered a fair price for Vittoria's embroideries without the disdain of before. "They are fine works," he admitted, examining the delicate stitches. "They deserve adequate value." Then when Donna Maria do Carmo asked Kawa for herbs for her sick son, treating him with genuine respect, without the superstitious fear she previously dedicated to any indigenous person. "I trust your herbs more than city medicines," she confessed. Gradually, without fanfare, the invisible barrier between the village and Kawa's people began to dissolve. It was Donna Celestina who first noticed the most significant change in Vittoria. "You carry a new life," she said simply, touching the young woman's womb during a visit to the village. Her wise eyes surveyed Vittoria's face, noting the different glow of her skin, the new softness in her gaze. "How do you know?" asked Vittoria, surprised, for she had not yet commented on her suspicions with anyone, not even Kawa. "My eyes have seen many lives begin," replied the healer with a smile. "And this will be a special child, a child of two worlds," continued the old woman. "A bridge builder." When Vittoria finally told Kawa about the pregnancy, he embraced her with a tenderness that made her heart overflow. That night, for the first time since she had known him, she saw tears in her husband's eyes, tears that reflected the cabin's fire like small mirrors of water. "My mother said, before departing for the spirit world, that one day the circle would be complete," he said, his voice choked. "That her son's child would bring healing to old wounds. Now I understand what she meant." News of the pregnancy reached the village like all others, through whispers and conversations at house doors. But unlike the malicious gossip of before, there was now an almost respectful expectation. "They say the child will be born in the spring," commented Donna Zulmira at the store. "Season of renewal," replied Seu Antonio, nodding his head, as if that were a sign of good omens. It was Father Roberto who surprised everyone by announcing during Sunday Mass that he would visit the village to bless the future baby. "Because all children are children of God," he declared, facing some disapproving looks from the more conservative, regardless of where they are born or who their parents are. His visit, which many expected to be quick and formal, extended for 2 days. The priest, for the first time, sat with the Pataxo elders, heard their stories, learned about their beliefs and customs, not to convert them, but to understand them. When he returned to the village, he brought with him a new understanding that he gradually began to transmit in his sermons, speaking of respect, acceptance, and how God manifests in many different forms. Vittoria and Kawa's son was born in spring, when the sunflowers were in full bloom. It was a difficult birth, requiring the combined wisdom of Donna Celestina and the indigenous midwives. For hours, while Vittoria struggled to bring her son into the world, women from both cultures worked side by side, each contributing their knowledge, their herbs, their prayers. When finally the baby's cry echoed through the cabin, a collective sigh of relief ran through the environment. The child had brown skin like his father, but his mother's light eyes, a combination that seemed to symbolize the very union it represented. They named him Rudar, which in the language of his ancestors meant love. But to the village, he soon became known as the Boy of Two Worlds. When he was 6 months old, Vittoria and Kawa took him to the church to be baptized. The ceremony, which many expected to be discreet, transformed into a true community celebration. The church was full, with people from the village and the tribe side by side without the usual segregation. After the Christian baptism, to the surprise of many, Father Roberto accompanied the family to the riverbank, where the APACHE elders performed their own blessing ceremony, dipping the baby's tiny feet in the sacred waters, painting small protection symbols on his forehead with natural annatto dye. The priest observed everything with respect, and at the end shook the hand of the oldest shaman in a gesture of mutual recognition. Years passed, and Rudar grew as the living bridge between two worlds that once looked at each other with mistrust. He was a boy with an easy smile and curious eyes, who moved naturally between the village and the tribe. He didn't have his mother's disability, but inherited from her the sensitivity to see beyond appearances. And from his father, the deep connection with nature and its silent lessons. He learned stories from books in the small school that now functioned in Vittoria's old house, and the ancestral legends around the fire with the tribe's elders. When he turned 7, something extraordinary happened. The village decided to hold its traditional São João festival, together with the solstice celebration that the APACHE held at the same time. For the first time, indigenous people and villagers celebrated together, each with their customs but sharing the same space, the same food, the same dances. The typical foods of the June festival, corn pudding, corn tamales, corn cake, shared space with traditional indigenous dishes. The quadrilles danced by the villagers alternated with the circular dances of the APACHE. In the center of the square, where once Vittoria had fallen and been humiliated, now stood a large pole decorated with colorful ribbons, half of them placed by the villagers, half by the indigenous people. And around it, everyone danced, without distinction. Vittoria, observing the scene with Kawa by her side, couldn't help but remember the long road traveled. Her leg still dragged, still caused difficulties, but it was no longer the first thing people saw in her. They saw the talented artisan whose embroideries were now sold even in the capital. They saw the dedicated mother. They saw the woman who, without wanting to, had become a symbol of a transformation greater than herself. "It's as you said," she spoke to Kawa as they watched Rudar running among the other children without any trace of the discrimination that she herself had suffered. "We are like the EP that grows on rock. No one believed we would flourish here." Kawa smiled, that rare and precious smile he saved only for her and their son. "And like the sunflowers," he replied, pointing to the flowers that now grew throughout the village, planted by practically all families. "Always turn toward the light, even on the darkest days." That night, as the celebration continued, Donna Celestina approached the couple. Now very elderly, she walked with difficulty supported by her cane, but her eyes still shone with the same wisdom as always. "The circle is complete," she said, looking at Rudar, who played with other children. "What was a wound has transformed into healing." Many years later, when Rudar was already a young teacher who taught both at the village school and in the tribe, teaching children to respect both cultures, Vittoria still kept the first embroidery that Kawa had given her. The hummingbird over the red flower, framed in jacaranda wood, hung in a place of honor on the wall of her house. And whenever she looked at it, she remembered the day when, for the first time in her life, someone saw beyond her disability. The day she learned that, when someone is truly seen, even a crooked leg straightens in the eyes of one who has soul. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share in the comments how the story of Vittoria and Kawa resonated with you. Just like the sunflowers that transformed São João do Agreste, your words can spread seeds of hope and inspiration